Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, well, I know it's only 3:20. And welcome. Thank you for joining us for this session. I was hoping we could do it in English and French, but I don't see any of... I'm not sure we have all the equipment for that. But yes, if you want to... Do we have the equipment? Okay, so we'll mix it a bit in English and French. My name is Salle. I'm a senior partner with McKinsey. I'm very, very excited to be back in person and see all my good old friends and meet some new friends. What we wanted to use on the two of these sessions, one today and one tomorrow, and it's really just to talk about what we want to see with our dear continent. We know we've gone through some difficult past few years, and the big question is, as we come out of the crisis, what kind of Africa do we want? And to have that discussion, we have, I think, an amazing panel of entrepreneurs and business leaders who have really already made a difference on the continent, and we'll hear they represent different sectors, which will give us a good perspective across the different sectors. So start with Karim Bernoussi from Intelsiam. We'll come back and have them explain to us what they do. We have Jean-Marie Aka from CGECI in Côte d'Ivoire. We have Mary Wamai from Equity Bank or Equity Group, and Karibu Rabiu from BUA. So I thought what we'll do is very quickly, let's take a look back and understand first how COVID has really affected the sector they're playing in. So let's really go through that and understand how COVID has affected. And then we can come and take a look forward around what is the outlook, what we want to see, and what it's going to take. So, Mary, why don't I start with you? How did COVID affect, well, what sector are you in? and how did COVID affect it? I think it's on.
Yeah, thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. Our group is banking and financial services powered by technology through a fintech company. And COVID, obviously, and maybe I'll just talk a little bit about our customers. We do a lot of mass banking, really banking at the lower end of the market, what we call the low-income segment. We have about 15 million customers so far. We also have small and medium enterprises and the consumer and retail business. And what we saw, obviously, the impact has been different depending on what customer segment are we talking about. So the majority of the small and medium enterprises, obviously, because of the lockdowns that we saw in most parts of the continent, Kenya included. Kenya is our biggest business right now, followed by the Democratic Republic of Congo. We are in 6 countries, Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, and South Sudan. So we saw, obviously, close down of the businesses, and that meant also that those who had already borrowed loans could not pay because their businesses were shut down. They were actually struggling with just meeting the basic necessities, food, shelter, and the rest. There were a lot of massive layoffs, obviously, in the SMEs and also in the corporate, so that also had a lot of issues in terms of incomes, which were taken off the split of a second, and we had to deal with all that. And of course, the healthcare systems were also challenged because the demand was too high. It's like nobody knew exactly what they were supposed to do, so all the facilities were really stretched, both the private and also the public health facilities across the region. What we also saw was there were some negative effects, but we also saw some of the sectors were actually affected positively. So sectors like agriculture, we saw a boom in some of the sectors, some of the food crops, some of the cash crops because we could no longer get the imports, so there was a lot of local production. We saw some sectors like e-commerce booming because people are now ordering food online and whatever they require for their daily needs. So the e-commerce sector was actually affected positively. We also saw the health sector actually, new facilities come, others expand their businesses. So I would say that we had a mix of both positive and negative impact from the COVID pandemic. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. So both positive and negative, depending on the sectors, I guess you were financing.
That's correct.
That's right.
Yeah.
Kabiru, let me come to you then. You're also across. We heard from Alaji this morning, but tell us a bit about how broad the BUA group is, and did you see the same experiences? Were there some of your businesses that were more affected than others?
Thank you so much. Actually, so BUA is 32, 33, year-old business. We started off as a trading, company, mostly doing the importation of steel, iron, wheat, rice, and you name it. So, but we converted into a manufacturing, outfit, starting in 2001, with the acquisition of Nigerian oil mills, then the largest edible oil producing company in Nigeria. And in 2005, we established our first, flour milling company in Kano, and 2008 in Lagos, and then a sugar refinery in 2008, and so on and so forth. We ventured into cement manufacturing in 2009, and 2010, we acquired, then, a publicly listed, cement company called the, Cement Company of Northern Nigeria PLC. Today, our businesses are spread between foods and infrastructure, mainly the production of foods, such as, flour, pasta, sugar, edible oil, and rice, as well as, manufacturing of cement. BUA Cement is the fourth most capitalized company, on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. It's the second largest producer of cement in Nigeria. And BUA Foods is the fifth largest company, on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. It is a combination of all our foods-related businesses. Sugar refinery, BUA today is the largest sugar refiner on the African continent with 1.5 million tons capacity between Lagos and Port Harcourt refineries. We have huge capacities in flour production and pasta. So, coming to, the effect of the COVID, really what we saw was that most of the, import-dependent businesses, the wheat milling businesses, were the ones that were most affected, by the pandemic, because, there were no abilities to import wheat for which to process and produce, locally. However, believe it or not, our cement production actually went up, significantly higher than, pre-COVID. And, that momentum, really continued. But today we have another crisis, the, Ukraine and, the Russia crisis. But, in summary, our import-dependent businesses were affected during COVID, but what we saw was that our integrated businesses, where the raw materials were sourced, produced locally, was not really that affected, and that actually, taught us a lot about, the import substitution and the, the integration of some of our businesses in, a way that we control our feedstock and raw materials. Thank you.
And it's funny because the same experience that Mary talked about. So some businesses did well, some didn't. I remember when we wrote our book, we interviewed Halaji Aliko, and he always said you should be diversified across countries, but also across sectors, because you never know. But the question I have, back to the conversation we're having this morning, what would it take? You're one of the biggest flour producers, right? Where do you import your wheat, I take it? Right? Where do you import it from, and what would it take to actually just produce it locally?
So it's actually quite interesting. Nigeria imports 98% of our wheat, needs, and we are not, alone. Egypt imports, maybe 98% also of their wheat. Last year, Egypt imported 12 million tons of wheat. They are the biggest importers of wheat in the world. Nigeria is the second largest importer of wheat in the world, at over 6 million. But the issue with local wheat production is that you need the right climate. You need inputs, you need irrigation, and so on and so forth. But also, so Nigeria may not be, competitive in wheat production because we do not have the climate. But we know that Ethiopia last year produced 3.6 million tons of wheat, so they could be competitive. South Africa, Kenya, and even Sudan could actually be competitive in wheat production. So I think what it would take is, simple. We need to begin to look at Africa as a country, break down all the barriers. So if Egypt imports 12 million tons and Nigeria imports 6 million tons, and we know Ethiopia has the comparative and the competitive advantage to produce wheat, as does South Africa and Kenya, we need to come together as a continent and see what do we need to do to support those countries that have the competitive and the comparable advantages to produce wheat for the countries that need them. And, this goes also the same for, cotton and a lot of commodities that we produce in, we have the capacity to produce in Africa, but because of the so many barriers that exist today, we are not able to do that. So I think we need to begin to look at how do we break those barriers and encourage the companies that have the capacity to produce some of those, commodities for the consumption of or benefit of other countries in the continent. Thank you.
Yeah, and let's come back to that because I think we should get into solution space and see what it would take. Monsieur Aka, vous êtes, je comprends, l'un des acteurs principaux dans la volaille en Côte d'Ivoire, mais aussi le président de la CGCI, donc c'est la Confédération des grandes entreprises. On peut commencer avec quels secteurs ont été les plus affectés par la crise du Covid en Côte d'Ivoire et quels secteurs ont été les moins affectés ou ont même bénéficié de cette crise?
Merci. Donc, je vais effectivement commencer à parler au plan général avec ma casquette de président du patronat ivoirien, donc au regard de l'ensemble des entreprises ivoiriennes. Et peut-être avant de terminer sur mon secteur d'activité en particulier. La crise de la Covid-19 a eu effectivement un impact, j'allais dire, violent et significatif sur les entreprises ivoiriennes. Donc, les statistiques que nous avons remontées de nos entreprises, je rappelle que la Confédération générale des entreprises de Côte d'Ivoire regroupe directement ou indirectement environ 3000 entreprises en Côte d'Ivoire et représente un peu plus de 80% du tissu économique de la Côte d'Ivoire. Les statistiques que nous avons remontées nous ont indiqué que les entreprises ont connu, avec la crise de la Covid-19, une baisse d'activité significative de l'ordre de 15 à 35%. Et effectivement, ça a été une incidence, je dirais, différenciée en fonction des secteurs d'activité. Et les secteurs les plus touchés ont été les secteurs liés à l'hôtellerie, les secteurs liés au tourisme, les secteurs des loisirs et bien sûr également certains secteurs industriels du fait de la perturbation des chaînes logistiques internationales d'approvisionnement. Mais c'est important de dire aussi qu'au-delà de cet aspect chiffré direct, la crise, compte tenu de son caractère, j'allais dire, imprévisible, a, dans un premier temps, créé une forme de traumatisme au niveau des entreprises. Et c'est à ce niveau-là qu'en tant qu'organisation patronale, nous étions vraiment obligés de nous engager dans une relation de proximité, d'information vis-à-vis des entreprises. Les entreprises donc, se sont retrouvées face à un mur de questions, déjà au plan de la santé publique pour leur personnel, leurs équipes, quelles étaient les bonnes mesures à prendre, etc. Donc, cette crise a eu donc, un effet direct, mais en même temps, les entreprises ont montré une forme de résilience. Il faut dire que l'organisation patronale, elle, a eu également à travailler directement avec l'État pour, je dirais, élaborer tous les plans de relance, tous les plans de relance économique. Tous les plans de relance économique. C'est ainsi qu'au niveau de la CGSI, nous avons proposé 35 mesures d'accompagnement qui, pour l'essentiel, ont été retenues par le gouvernement pour alimenter son plan de relance économique. Moi, je suis un opérateur économique, personnellement, dans le secteur agroalimentaire et principalement dans le secteur des productions avicoles et dans le secteur de la minoterie. Dans nos activités, nous avons subi effectivement directement les effets de cette crise, donc de manière relativement courte, heureusement, mais très profonde. Et donc nous avons connu une baisse drastique des niveaux d'activité de plus de 50% du jour au lendemain, sur une période d'environ 3 mois, 4 mois, et donc qui demandait une adaptation forte. Baisse d'activité extrêmement importante, liée aux mesures de confinement. Nous sommes passés par les couvre-feux, par tout cela, à donc l'arrêt de tout ce qui était activité de loisirs, de consommation. Et donc nous avons dû faire preuve de résilience, d'autant plus qu'également que la perturbation des chaînes logistiques a posé les problèmes de maintien même de l'activité. Heureusement, la Côte d'Ivoire, et je pense comme beaucoup de pays africains, ne sont pas restés longtemps dans un blocage complet de leur économie avec des programmes de confinement de très longue durée. Donc,
sauf l'Afrique du Sud où j'habite.
Sauf l'Afrique du Sud, effectivement.
Et le Maroc.
Voilà. À l'exception de ces quelques pays, l'ensemble des gouvernants africains optaient pour des confinements courts, et qui s'imposaient d'ailleurs compte tenu de la nature de notre tissu économique avec un secteur informel extrêmement important. Et tout cela a permis donc une relative reprise de l'activité assez tôt. Les produits, les entreprises, les industries exportatrices, pour certaines, ont eu vraiment, au contraire, des opportunités, des occasions de développement de leurs activités, avec des hausses de certains prix, compte tenu de la difficulté du commerce mondial d'une manière générale. Et c'est ce qui a permis aux entreprises ivoiriennes, d'une manière générale, de ressortir de l'année 2020 avec, je dirais, des effets, somme toute, mitigés, et avec une reprise qui a commencé à montrer des signes positifs dès 2021.
OK. On reviendra là-dessus parce qu'on aimerait comprendre un peu le outlook pour 2022 aussi et pour le futur. Mais Karine, si je viens vers vous, vous êtes dans le domaine de l'outsourcing. Et donc, la crise, est-ce qu'elle a eu un effet positif ou négatif sur votre business?
Alors, je vais rapidement parler de notre business pour expliquer un petit peu nos activités et comment nous sommes organisés. Aujourd'hui, Intelsia agit dans le domaine de l'outsourcing. On est une boîte marocaine dont le centre de décision est à Casablanca. Nous finissons en 2022 avec 40 000 salariés sur 17 pays et nous avons 90 sites. Donc je donne ces chiffres juste pour expliquer en 2020, lorsque d'un coup vous avez un certain nombre de pays qui doivent arrêter leurs activités ou on doit mettre les gens chez eux, alors qu'on ne pouvait pas envisager auparavant d'avoir des gens qui répondaient au téléphone au lieu d'être dans des plateformes téléphoniques, d'être chez eux. Pourquoi? Parce que les donneurs d'ordre, déjà les clients, ne voulaient pas, pour des raisons de sécurité, de confidentialité. Donc il a fallu à un moment donné, lorsque nous avons été mis devant le fait accompli, les donneurs d'ordre ont été obligés de revoir leur copie et de dire OK, il faudrait envisager de le faire. Et nous n'étions pas prêts. Et nous n'étions pas prêts parce que plusieurs pays commençaient à confiner l'un après l'autre. Il fallait s'organiser. Donc, première réaction par rapport à ça, c'est on va passer une année 2020 catastrophique où tout ce que nous avions emmagasiné ou gagné auparavant, nous allions le perdre. Par contre, nous avons pris une décision très claire dès le début, c'est garantir la sécurité de nos salariés, garantir la sécurité financière et sanitaire de nos salariés. Ça a permis de mobiliser l'entreprise, mobiliser l'ensemble des ressources pour trouver des solutions. Alors en 15 jours, 3 semaines, nous avons pu mettre 20 000 personnes en télétravail. Donc avec l'apport de nos clients qui ont permis effectivement à nos salariés de travailler de chez eux, grâce à la mobilisation de l'ensemble du personnel de l'entreprise, nous avons connu 2-3 mois difficiles, puisque à partir de mars, avril, mai 2020, baisse d'activité nécessaire parce que il fallait se reconfigurer. Mais à partir de juin, nous avons retrouvé les activités normales. Donc, alors, disons, devant ce drame ou devant ces choses-là, notre secteur s'en est très bien sorti. 2020, pour nous, était une année exceptionnelle. Et d'ailleurs, 2021 aussi. Et je pense que l'ensemble du secteur en est sorti gagnant. Gagnant pourquoi ? Parce que l'ensemble des acteurs ont commencé à digitaliser leurs process. Et quand vous digitalisez les process, forcément, vous avez besoin de plateformes pour supporter effectivement les salariés, plutôt les utilisateurs. Nous n'étions pas à ce moment-là trop exposés au secteur du tourisme. Donc, si vous voulez, pour faire un récap, clairement, le Covid a permis au secteur de se réinventer, a permis au secteur d'être beaucoup plus agile et de faire face, et même a ouvert des opportunités. Aujourd'hui, nous pouvons envisager notre business différemment. À titre d'exemple, juste après la crise du Covid, nous avons ouvert des sites hybrides. C'est des sites que nous pouvions mettre à distance des centres, des grandes agglomérations, et nous permettons à nos salariés de travailler 4 jours chez eux et 1 jour sur site. Et donc, ça permet de désenclaver un certain nombre de villes. Et donc, en l'occurrence, nous l'avons fait à Oujda, où initialement, nous n'envisageons pas d'aller sur place, mais le fait d'avoir cette possibilité de travailler à distance et ce qu'a apporté le Covid nous a permis de nous installer là-bas et aujourd'hui d'être presque à 500 salariés dans une ville comme Oujda.
Parce qu'en fait, nous avons remarqué en fait que les entreprises et les pays qui étaient plus avancés côté digital s'en sont mieux sortis. Et c'était ça votre cas aussi, il me semble.
Alors, je sais pas si on va dire est-ce que parce qu'on était plus avancé ou quoi que ce soit, c'est qu'aujourd'hui, face à une crise, il faut trouver des solutions. Et aujourd'hui, les solutions que nous avons trouvées en France ne sont pas peut-être exactement les mêmes qu'au Maroc, qu'à Madagascar, qu'à Abidjan, qu'à Dakar. Donc, nous avons mobilisé l'ensemble des moyens. Aujourd'hui, l'Afrique a des infrastructures qui sont, disons, acceptables pour pouvoir faire face à, disons, aux challenges auxquels nous étions affrontés. Donc clairement aujourd'hui, c'était beaucoup plus la mobilisation de l'entreprise, beaucoup plus la mobilisation des salariés et la compréhension de nos partenaires, de nos parties prenantes. Aujourd'hui, nos parties prenantes, ce sont nos clients et nos people. Et donc les deux ont fait face et ont trouvé des solutions pour répondre à leurs clients.
Mais vous avez fait ce pivot très rapidement.
Écoutez, on était obligés. Donc on a... en fait... quand vous êtes en crise, vous êtes tout le temps en train d'essayer de trouver des solutions et de vous réinventer ou de créer des choses. Il a fallu trouver des solutions pour équiper les salariés, parce que dites-vous que équiper un salarié d'un ordinateur portable n'est pas la même problématique à Paris, à Marseille, à Rabat, Casablanca, Abidjan et à Madagascar. Donc, et il fallait trouver des solutions à chacune des situations. Et des solutions que vous pouviez opposer à l'ensemble du groupe, parce que vous avez 40 000 salariés, vous devez les traiter de la même manière. Donc il a fallu faire énormément d'efforts et beaucoup de communication. On a utilisé les canaux de communication Facebook où je communiquais avec les 30 000 collaborateurs en leur expliquant ce qu'on fait et pourquoi on le fait. Parce que quand vous êtes dans un moment de crise, les gens sont en panique. Donc la première chose, c'est de les rassurer, c'est de dire ce qu'on fait, faire ce qu'on dit, et d'essayer de les projeter par rapport à la sortie de cette crise. Donc tous ces éléments ont fait qu'on a pu sortir disons, de cette situation. Mais aujourd'hui, l'Afrique, en termes technologiques ou disons en termes d'infrastructure, a les moyens de pouvoir faire face à cela.
Parfait. Let's actually take build on that thread, a forward-looking lens now, Mary. And let's start with you. As we imagine the Africa we want, what Africa do you want? We can talk about, your sector, but how do you imagine this Africa?
Well, I think we can start with what I see working for Africa, because I think out of that is where we develop those capabilities and build the Africa we want for real. The first thing is we are very endowed with natural resources, a very youthful and energetic population, which is also becoming very well educated. We have also the opportunity of numbers. When you look at the demographics, the population growth and all that, it really favors us. So we can utilize that capability. And I think the other thing I see working for Africa is the very huge and fast adaptation of technology, whether you're talking about mobile use and digital programs and all that. And we have confirmed that as a business, that our people are really adopting technology very quickly. If I just give you an example, is at the moment, in Equity, we have about 98% of all the transactions happening on digital channels, as opposed to the traditional brick and mortar branch, which was the initial investment that we made. So we have tried and tested the digitization model, and we have proved that the uptake is extremely, very, very high and fast. And this is without exception, whether you're talking about Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, everywhere, even the DRC, where we just added a business by Amaja 2 years ago. And we are seeing that trend continuing within the region. So the Africa that we really would want to go to is a food secure Africa. So what we have done is really have had some very significant programs promoting agriculture. And I do totally agree with my fellow panelist, Kabiru here, that we can do very small steps, even within the existing infrastructure, to promote agriculture, both small scale and large scale. We have tried and tested, and in Kenya, for instance, we got one of the communities in a very dry region to try their hand at cereal farming, that is sorghum production. And within a year, we could see the production rising so much because it is the right crop for the right location. What we find in some of the locations is that our farmers don't grow the right kind of crops because they don't know what to grow. We just got some experts, they did research, and they were able to identify the right crop for the right location, and the farmers were able to build, and they were able to sustain themselves with food, and they even had excess, which they sell to the beer manufacturing company. And that improves their income levels within the region. So there are some very small steps that we can do. A lot of training for these farmers, small-scale farmers. So even when we talk about wheat production, we don't need the large scale only. I think the small-scale outgrowers can do that. And that is why also the banks are there, because they will extend the financial capability to these farmers. And then they have the control of the cash flow, and they're able to improve that production very quickly. We've also identified manufacturing as another area for a huge opportunity for growth. We are seeing a lot of even car manufacturers now coming, there are battery manufacturers who are coming, and they are being supported by the financial institutions like Equity, so that they can set up their operations locally. The labor is available, highly skilled labor, which is local within Kenya, creating employment. But I think I would say also the biggest space I also see is promotion of innovations that really enable especially the young people to get engaged very productively, and also they're able to exercise their creativity. And we are seeing a lot of money coming. In an earlier presentation, we were told that most of the funds that are coming now are coming to support ventures in fintechs and those kind of innovations and initiatives. So for me, I see we have developed what we are calling in Equity the Marshall Plan, which is the strategy for the next 5 to 10 years. And we have identified those key sectors. And one of the other sectors we have also added is the regional integration, where we are actually promoting the countries, or in encouraging the countries to do trade amongst themselves. If I give an example, for instance, in December, we organized the Kenyan businesses to visit DRC in a DRC mission. And the idea was for them to go and see the opportunities in the other country. And now, as of now, that is about 6 months later, we have seen investments of about $3 billion already changing hands between the two countries. Just from that one event that we did in December in collaboration with the Kenyan government and the DRC government. So I see a lot of opportunities, regional integration. And I think the cross-border trade, we don't need to import some of these things from out there. Absolutely. So when it say, in Kenya, we are saying we have a deficit in wheat because we import the majority of it from Ukraine. And the question is, do we really have to depend on somebody else to supply the wheat to us, whereas our own farmers can do that very productively and become self-sufficient? You cut down the cost because it's a major import, so that also will improve the currency deficits and all that. Exactly. So you actually sort out a lot of the issues that today our governments are dealing with.
And maybe just one quick question to you, and we'll go and do the same for the panelists. I'm sure, and we'll come to the audience for questions, but there'll be a big question, all across digital, food services, manufacturing, innovation, all these companies are going to need financing, right? So the question is, what is Equity Bank or Group doing, and what should other banks do to really help support these companies as they go down this path of trying to manufacture more locally?
Yeah, we are doing it in many ways, and one of the ways we are doing is at different levels. We have very youth-specific and innovation-specific programs for the youth, the young people. We have women-specific programs. We just got a guarantee program in collaboration with one of our partners, actually several of our partners, and we are extending guarantees through risk-sharing arrangements that will give the bank a lot of leeway to be able to extend some of these facilities to either the old businesses, top-up of loans, or new businesses that are starting up. The vision that we have under the Marshall Plan is actually to create 25 million individual borrowers and 5 million businesses. Now, 5 million businesses, based on the research that has been done and the statistics available, means that for each of those 5 million businesses, the minimum number of people they employ is 5. So we are talking about creation of about 25 million jobs in the next 5 years or so. So that's the way to do it. And the banks are ready. We are already doing those programs. We have also started as part of the social initiative program under the group foundation of the group to do what we call financial literacy. What financial literacy does is just to train these customers because they are just starting in business. Nobody taught them how to run a business in business school or whatever level they have gone to in university or high school or whatever. But they are now business people. They are entrepreneurs. So we teach them in a program how to run and manage their business. Sometimes very basic things like how to keep books of accounts or daily records, debt management. You don't take a debt for consumption. You take a debt and invest in the business. This is how to separate between your personal money. Don't overborrow. So those sometimes we think they are small lessons, but they mean a lot. Yeah. And we are seeing that just because of those programs, they are not only becoming better managers of their businesses, but the default rates actually come down.
Got you.
And the statistics are showing that.
Got you.
Yeah.
I love the 25 million jobs aspiration.
Yeah, that's the aspiration.
Kabiru,
yeah.
What is what do you want for Africa?
It can be done. That's what we say.
Perfect. What do you want for Africa? What's the BUA Group want for Africa?
So I think the Africa that we want is, Africa that is self-sufficient, at least in the, basic human needs. So food security, shelter or housing, clothing, and healthcare. These are basic, human needs, and I think we can do it. We'd always say that Africa, still contains the 60% of the world's, arable land. We have the water, we have the climate, we have everything that we need to be able to be, self-sufficient in food production. I would like to see Africa that adds value, to her resources. So for example, if you look at, textile and cotton, for example, Burkina Faso, Mali, and, Ivory Coast are amongst the top 15 world's exporters of cotton. Yes, Nigeria imports $4 billion worth of textile and garments. And, the thing is, what do we do, to be able to add value to some of these commodities? Because for each $100 worth of cotton you export, you import $1,000 worth of garments and textile. And we are doing it, Burkina Faso exporting, cotton, Nigeria is importing textile. What do we need to do, to add value, to the, commodities and resources that we export cheaply, raw materials, and import finished products? Because by continuing to do that, we're exporting jobs and opportunities and importing, poverty. So Africa needs to, continue the intra-African trade. I like, the example of the Ghanaian president that he said, it's not by coincidence that the continents that are doing least as intra-African trade is also the poorest, because Africa trades only 15% amongst ourselves. Europe is 70-75%. Asia is over 60%, and so on and so forth. So it's not by coincidence that we continue to do, but so we need to be able to be in a position where we add value, to the resources that we have in order to create wealth and employment for our people.
And what's Bua Group doing to help us get there?
So what we are doing in Nigeria, for example, is that we are backward integrating, domesticating production of sugar, for example.
Oh. Not wheat, but sugar.
Sugar,
okay.
Sugar, and there's reason for that. So we have a 20,000, hectare plantation, that's going to be producing almost 20% of Nigeria's sugar needs. It's $350 million investment, and we're going to be producing over 200,000 metric tons of sugar and about 20 milliliters of ethanol, and so on and so forth. And that is what we continue to do. But, so for example, if you look at wheat, Nigeria does not have the climate to grow wheat. I mean, that's just, the reality. But if Kenya or South Africa or any of these countries are able, what do we need to do to come together and support those countries so that we do not have to depend on Canada and United States and Russia and Ukraine to import, our wheat? So we are domesticating production. We are backward integrating in some of the things, that we're doing in order to ensure that we are self-sufficient. I think the current crisis in Ukraine has really taught, the world that, every continent and every country needs to try and be able to be, self-sufficient in food. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I think the COVID crisis has taught us the same, right, when it comes to other commodities. Monsieur Aka, quels sont vos rêves pour le secteur privé en Côte d'Ivoire?
Oui. Merci. Je pense qu'effectivement, la question que vous posez est importante, parce que je suis sûr que si on fait le tour dans cette salle, toute cette salle, vu les tranches d'âge que nous représentons, personne parmi nous n'a vécu ou a pensé vivre une période de perturbation, de stress économique à une échelle large, aussi importante que celle que nous vivons depuis 2020. Crise de la Covid, nous en avons parlé, guerre en Ukraine, russo-ukrainienne. Et donc, effectivement, on ne peut pas sortir de tout ça sans se poser la question de revoir notre paradigme. Et donc, je pense que votre question va dans ce sens. Et moi, je suis également tout à fait rassuré par les réponses que mes prédécesseurs ont indiquées, parce que j'en arrive à dire, finalement, effectivement, on veut la même chose. Parce que oui, moi, ce que je rêve, mon rêve pour l'Afrique, ce que je rêve pour les entreprises ivoiriennes, c'est je rêve d'une Afrique qui produit. Une Afrique qui produit. Une Afrique qui crée de la valeur. Une Afrique qui crée des emplois pour ses enfants. Une Afrique qui assure un minimum de souveraineté, de sécurité sur ses besoins essentiels. effectivement, quand on a dit cela, c'est effectivement une Afrique qui produit, c'est déjà commencé par notre production agricole sur laquelle nous avons des atouts, un avantage indéniable. Le collègue vient de le rappeler tout à l'heure, nos terres disponibles, etc. Mais une Afrique qui ne s'arrête pas seulement à la production agricole primaire, qui transforme, qui crée de la valeur, qui s'industrialise. Industrialise d'abord ses produits alimentaires, industrialise ses produits, ses biens de consommation. C'est vraiment de cela que nous rêvons. Une Afrique qui n'a pas d'autre choix que de faire ça pour créer des emplois pour sa jeunesse. Parce qu'on a une Afrique dont la population augmente de façon très significative. Des millions, des dizaines de millions de jeunes à qui il faut créer des emplois chaque année. Donc, vraiment, nous rêvons d'une telle Afrique. Alors, effectivement, on a vu comment nous étions tous dépendants, comment nous commandions des masques dans le monde entier, comment nous commandions des choses basiques. Et oui, on se dit, ouais, pourquoi pas, effectivement, on a le textile au Burkina, au Mali, en Côte d'Ivoire, on a certaines choses. Pourquoi on ne peut pas faire ne serait-ce que des masques pour se protéger? On a besoin de cette Afrique-là. Et on rêve de cette Afrique-là. Alors là, après, on se dit, mais si on pense toujours la même chose, peut-être la question, c'est comment on fait?
Comment on va y arriver?
Comment on va y arriver?
Ça, c'est ma question pour vous.
Comment on va y arriver? Et oui, je pense que là-dessus, effectivement, pour y arriver, nous avons besoin, j'allais dire, secteur privé, entrepreneur, de parler, d'être en phase avec nos dirigeants, avoir un vrai dialogue secteur privé, secteur public constructif, et qui nous permettent de bien identifier ce qui les relève je dirais, de la charge des gouvernants, de la charge des États, parce qu'on ne peut pas y arriver si on ne travaille pas à mettre en place un minimum d'infrastructures de base pour permettre d'aller sur ces terres-là, de pouvoir évacuer les produits agricoles qu'on aura donc récoltés à l'intérieur du pays. On ne peut pas y arriver si on n'est pas capable de donner un peu d'efficience à nos ports, si on n'est pas capable de mettre en place des chemins de fer. On ne peut pas y arriver si on ne travaille pas, nos gouvernants ne travaillent pas effectivement à l'élargissement des marchés, à raisonner sous-régional, régional, pour avoir des marchés plus significatifs et qui permettent de faire jouer une complémentarité entre nos entreprises, entre nos économies. Et je pense que vraiment, aujourd'hui, au sortir de toutes ces crises-là, et qui ne sont certainement pas les dernières, parce que nous, au niveau du patronat ivoirien, l'année dernière, nous avons organisé notre rencontre annuelle, et le thème, c'était justement les entreprises à être résilientes, parce que nous sommes dans un monde qui sera en perpétuelle crise dorénavant. Donc voilà à quoi nous rêvons et nous devons maintenant, au-delà du rêve, et je pense avec toutes les parties prenantes, s'attacher à voir comment on transforme ce rêve-là en réalité, si tant est qu'effectivement c'est un rêve partagé.
Absolument. Je suis sûr qu'il est partagé. On reviendra, we're going to come for questions and answers, but Karim, l'Afrique aura, avec toute la main-d'œuvre qu'on aura en Afrique, quelles sont vos perspectives du point de vue du secteur de l'outsourcing? Alors,
si on parle du secteur, le secteur est un secteur qui prévoit en 2023 1,5 million de salariés dans le secteur, et je pense qu'on peut faire beaucoup plus. Beaucoup plus parce qu'aujourd'hui, si on prend l'Afrique, disons, les forces de l'Afrique, c'est son capital humain et ses ressources naturelles. Alors, si aujourd'hui les ressources naturelles, on ne les maîtrise pas parfaitement, on n'a pas parfois 100% d'autonomie sur leur exploitation, les ressources naturelles, on peut le faire. On a cette capacité et il faut s'appuyer sur ça. Aujourd'hui, le capital humain en Afrique est quelque chose d'exceptionnel sur lequel nous pouvons nous appuyer pour créer de la richesse. Alors, pour revenir à notre secteur, qui est un secteur qui effectivement utilise les ressources humaines en particulier, et qui est un people business, les perspectives sont intéressantes. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes devant une Europe vieillissante. Nous sommes sur une Europe qui veut effectivement se baser sur les ressources, sur le manpower de l'Afrique. Donc aujourd'hui, on a la capacité de pouvoir adresser le besoin de l'ensemble des pays européens en particulier et en Afrique également, dans le secteur de l'outsourcing. On peut développer ce secteur de manière importante. Il suffit aujourd'hui juste d'investir. Aujourd'hui, je prends l'exemple, nous avons des ressources naturelles. Au lieu de laisser piller tout notre talent dans les différents pays, il faut pouvoir avoir des entreprises qui vont pas utiliser, qui vont plus ou moins s'appuyer sur ces ressources pour développer des entreprises locales, pour que nos ressources puissent rester chez elles, pour que nos ressources puissent vivre en dignité dans les pays où ils sont nés, dans les villages où ils sont nés. Et ça, notre secteur peut l'apporter. La distance, le fait de pouvoir faire des activités à distance nous permet d'apporter des jobs dans des endroits éloignés, de désenclaver des régions. Et je pense que le capital humain est la chose la plus importante. Et au lieu de laisser d'autres entreprises européennes, internationales utiliser, ça doit être les entreprises africaines qui doivent créer de la valeur, qui doivent faire grandir les entreprises, qui doivent faire grandir leurs enfants pour pouvoir créer. Alors je donne un exemple. Aujourd'hui, lorsque nous sommes allés dans l'outsourcing, on est perçu comme une entreprise qui a une faible valeur ajoutée. Alors quand on a commencé par des actes simples, donc où les gens effectivement répondaient au téléphone, mais plus on avance, aujourd'hui en Afrique, on a 20 000 collaborateurs qui travaillent en Afrique et font aujourd'hui des activités de plus en plus complexes. Et donc, c'est des gens qui commencent à apprécier leur job, qui ont effectivement le sentiment d'apporter une vraie valeur à l'entreprise et à ses clients. Donc ça, c'est des choses sur lesquelles nous devons nous appuyer et nous devons pouvoir monter en valeur graduellement pour pouvoir avoir des jobs pérennes dans nos pays et pour pouvoir apporter la dignité à nos compatriotes.
Perfect. I think we're all aligned with what we want and to say how we're going to get there. Let's open it up. We have about, I'd say, 10, 15 minutes. So let's take a round of 3 or 4 questions. If you can just please state your name and your organization, but please keep your questions short so we can take quite a few questions. Do we have mics around the room? I don't know if you have mics. All right, I see a question here. Do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Hi, my name is Salle. I'm from Senegal. I run a family business infrastructure development group. So my question is, in order to materialize this vision that you all have, this will require massive investments, right? I think we talked about this morning in the thousands of billions, and it's expected that over 70% is going to come from the private sector, right? How exactly are African companies going to solve for those capital needs, particularly when it comes to those assets that take a long time to mature and generate value and working capital?
Right. Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Great. My name is Resi Muchilwa. I'm the CEO for Novartis for Sub-Saharan Africa. Novartis is a pharmaceutical company. I think if we look at what happened, COVID exposed actually the health inequities and the health challenges that we have within Africa. And it's very evident that you cannot have a wealthy economy without a healthy community. What do you think, or according to you, what are your views on health contribution towards the Africa we want?
Health contribution towards?
The Africa we want.
The Africa one, okay.
Yes.
She reminds us we haven't spoken about health. Yes.
Hello, thank you. Ismail Rissa, I'm the Managing Director for Pratt & Whitney Canada in aviation, so running Europe, Africa, and Middle East. I have a question in two folds. For one that is a bit generic, which is more along the side what was discussed regarding wheat production. Are we really trying to solve the right problem by trying to grow wheat when we have other grains that we could be focusing on in the continent that will have better yields? And that was an element that have been discussed, but what are the plans to focus on marketing the products we can do on the continent for the continent? The second one is a bit more specific to my industry and aviation, and what role do you think aviation can play in this whole 15% intra-Africa trade when we have all the conditions for sustainable aviation developing because of a lot of land mass borders, no infrastructure, and I'm not seeing that industry taking off in the continent.
All right. Should we take one more here?
Entrepreneur monégasque à Monaco. Moi, je voudrais vous poser une question un peu sur les partenariats internationaux. Quels sont finalement, bon, quasi tous les pays s'intéressent à l'Afrique d'une façon parfois différente. Quels sont, selon vous, actuellement, dans le stade de développement, des besoins de financement, infrastructures, investissements dans les différents domaines, les partenaires les plus adéquats actuellement pour accompagner en privé-privé ou en public-privé le développement que vous souhaitez?
Okay. Why don't we do this? Raising capital, Mary, I'll come to you because you finance it. Should we focus on wheat, on other products? Kabru, maybe, you've spoken about that. The aviation's contribution, I guess you must travel a lot. You have businesses across the continent. So I'm like, maybe about the aviation contribution et les partenariats internationaux. Je ne sais pas si vous voulez répondre. And then for health, anybody can talk about that as well. All right.
Yeah. I think I will talk about investments and comment on health also. Yeah. Okay. So I think the issue that has been there before is that we've had financial products that were not relevant to the people or that were not structured in a way that answers to what we do on a day-to-day basis, because probably they were cut and paste from other jurisdictions. Now, what we are trying to do is to have tailor-made products that address not only particular segments and sectors, but also either groups of customers or almost to granularity of what does an individual customer want, and you tailor-make those products. So I can confirm that there's a lot of money. The banks have money. We have a lot of funding that is coming to support various sectors. I can say for now we have what I talked earlier, the women-specific funding that is coming. We have funds that are coming to support agribusiness, either at the SME level or at the peasant farmer level. And we have also funding that is coming either as seed capital, venture capital, or other forms of capital for the innovators. So I can say confidently that the money is there. I think all we need to figure out is how to structure these products in a way that it really works for whoever wants to take the cash, because I think that is the problem we've been dealing with before. The products were not structured very well. They were too generic, especially for some of the sectors. And for the startups also. The startups have had a lot of issues. So we have developed very innovative products, including group lending products for those who are starting up and they don't have assets to secure the money that they are borrowing to support them. There's a lot of investment now, like for instance in my bank on trade finance facilities in business lending or business banking, as we call it. So I think we are well covered there. Now on health, we actually discovered that there was a gap actually before COVID, probably 2 or 3 years before COVID, because what we noticed is that a lot of our customers who are defaulting on loans were defaulting because someone in the family got sick and the funds they had were diverted to health purposes. Either they had to pay the hospital or buy the medicine or whatever. And when we looked at that sector very carefully, we noticed that there was a gap even in the supply of affordable and quality health. And what we did through our group foundation is we say that we are going to make health one of the key pillars. So we are actually doing it under the social engine programs, social impact programs, not under the commercial program. We have piloted with the setting up about, I think now we are at number 74, clinic number 74, and the results have been amazing. Because within a space of about 2 or 3 years, of course, COVID escalated the need And that is why you can see even the growth went very quickly, but we also learned the lessons very quickly. But the interesting statistics that you need to keep in mind is that we have realized that we are able to cover that client visit in Kenya, because that's where we have started as a pilot, from $15. So if you come to our clinic, lab, medicine, consultation, everything, $15. If you go to the typical hospital or larger clinic, you will pay $45. So we have brought down the cost by more than, I think, a third. It's a third of the cost in the other facilities. And you're getting very high quality. And what we have done is we train we support, we have an education, under the education program, under the same foundation, we have sponsored some doctors to university. And those doctors are the same ones who are now managing those clinics. And we give them, as a bank, a loan to fund the startup of this clinic. And then we have created a franchise whereby we do centralized procurement, so that brings the cost of operation very, very low. So we have tried and tested, and the next step now is to actually scale up. We are targeting 1,000 clinics within the region, apart from DRC. For Democratic Republic of Congo, because their situation is even not very good, we are targeting 4,000 clinics within the next 2 to 3 years. So I think it's an area of focus right now. Yeah.
And for me, the question is I think it's amazing, but how do we scale this across the continent? That's going to be, how do we really scale this, right? But thank you for that, really, thank you. Kebru, beyond wheat, okay. I don't know what that means. But let's go quickly. Beyond wheat, what else should we focus on?
So I think when you look at food in Africa, be it wheat, rice, and so forth, I think we need to have the fundamentals right. So for example, in any food production, you need 3 basic things. You need the infrastructure, which is the irrigation. You need the inputs, such as the fertilizers, and then you need the mechanization, right? Now, when you look at Africa, some of the lowest per capita consumers of fertilizers are in Africa. For example, Central Africa did 0.4 kg per hectare compared to 175 kg that India did in 2018. Nigeria Republic did 0.6. Nigeria did 20 kg per hectare. I mean, yet Morocco holds 75% of the world's reserve of phosphate rocks, which is the main ingredient in any fertilizer production. So, whether you talk about wheat, whether you talk about rice, whether you talk about corn, and so on and so forth, we need to be able to domesticate production of fertilizers and inputs for African continent. We need to be able to provide irrigation infrastructure for Africa, and as well as mechanization. So if you look at per hectare of tractor usage, Africa has the lowest in the world. And so long as we do not look at these issues and try to see how we can resolve them as a continent, we'll continue to have this issue. And I think the way forward is that the Africa Continental Free Trade Zone has given us an opportunity to be able to break down these barriers. What needs to happen is to engage the private sector actively, to come to the table and also drive some of these discussions. Because what tends to happen now is that you have a lot of, government involvement and, discussions. I think Africa has 5 trading blocks, the regional blocks, the ECOWAS, the SADC, the COMESA, and so on and so forth. We need to be able to bring 5 or few of African business champions from each regional block to come to the table and have a seat, with the drivers of the Africa Continental Free Trade area, and, come up with a plan, Africa Continental plan to domesticate production for our use, for our people, in order to drive growth in the continent. Thank you.
Thank you. Karim, le secteur aérien.
Alors, c'était quoi la question?
La question, c'est le rôle du secteur aérien pour augmenter intra-Africa trade.
Écoutez, si vous vous déplacez entre les pays africains et vous vous déplacez souvent, c'est toujours un problème. C'est un problème, vous le connaissez, par contre, c'est pas insoluble. Donc, on trouvera toujours des solutions. Le seul problème, c'est que certaines compagnies en profitent pour effectivement avoir des prix qui sont hors de prix, des billets hors de prix, et ça, c'est pas acceptable, surtout dans des pays où on veut promouvoir les échanges et tout. Donc, voilà. Donc, c'est pas le secteur n'est pas, en fait, ce secteur-là ne nous aide pas pour faire du business, mais il ne nous empêche pas de le faire.
OK. Et M. Aka, les partenariats internationaux, avec qui devrait-on mettre en place ce genre de partenariat?
Oui, non, je pense que les partenariats devraient être les plus élargis possibles. Hein. Mais je pense que, de mon point de vue, il faut donc plutôt, en termes de partenariat, privilégier des partenariats qui viennent apporter des réponses aux problématiques principales. Et à mon avis, donc au-delà des partenariats, si ces problématiques-là sont levées, l'Afrique même sera suffisamment attractive, attrayante pour attirer des financements, pour attirer des financements de toute origine. Et je voudrais donc juste terminer en faisant un clin d'œil à mon ami et frère, président du patronat camerounais, avec qui on parlait au déjeuner, et on disait finalement, peut-être qu'il faudrait, il pourrait être intéressant dans nos États de dire que tous les financements extérieurs, les bilatéraux, les grands financements, devraient s'occuper d'une seule chose, de financer toutes les infrastructures, tous les leviers qui bloquent l'intégration. Voilà. Et le reste, le laisser aux États. Et pour ce qui est du privé, si tous ces obstacles-là sont levés, s'il y a l'autoroute Abidjan-Accra, qu'on peut aller livrer des produits dans un sens comme dans l'autre en 3 heures de temps, les financements privés vont venir eux-mêmes faire la cour devant nos usines. Ils vont être devant nos bureaux pour nous proposer leur financement. Donc, je crois que tous les financements ont leur place. Merci.
I love it. So there you go. That is the Africa we want. That's what it's going to take to get there. And the question is, it's up to all of us to make it happen. Thank you very much. Please give a hand of applause to the panel.